So, welcome everybody. This is our fifth class, second to last class on Kabbalah. Today's topic is Kabbalistic ethics. Not necessarily the most exciting of the topics. I think last week was kind of, probably one of the more edgy and exciting topics. That being, or last session was, superstition, magic, and it's not always very exciting to talk about, being a good person and all of that. But I think it's actually the basis of Jewish spirituality. And it's the basis of Kabbalah as well. I think it's a large part of Kabbalah is about ethics. So we're going to get into all of that. But first, I wanted to start with a nigun, with a wordless melody. And then I'll say a blessing over Torah study. And then we'll begin. So I'll just start to sing, and when people get the melody, they can join along. Yai lai la la lai, yai lai la la lai, yai lai 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 lai, lai 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 lai, yai lai la la lai, yai lai la la lai, lai 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 lai. Yai lai la la la, yai lai la la la, ni ni nai 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 nai, yai nai 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 nai. Now there's a second part. Yai la la, nai na nai, nai na nai, nai na nai. And that's it. Yai na nai. Yai na na, nai na na, yai na na, yai na na, yai na na, nai na na. Back to the beginning. Yai nai na na nai, ni ni nai nai na na nai, iri dai 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 dai, iri dai 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 dai, yai nai na na nai, ni ni nai nai na na nai, yai nai na nai nai, ni ni nai 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 nai, yai na nai nai na 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 nai, yai nai na na nai, nai nai na na nai, ni ni nai 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 nai, yai nai 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 nai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, O God of truth, deliver us. Amen. So as I've done in previous sessions, I'd like to go around and present a question for people. And that question today is, what personality trait or personality attribute do you think is the most important for a person to have to be a good person in this world? So I'll start. I'm Rabbi Ben, and I think patience. Patience.
I'm Jim. And I don't know. Reflective, or if that's an attribute.
Reflectiveness.
Thoughtful, I guess.
Great.
I'm Beth, and I'm going to say trustworthiness.
I'm going to write these down. Patience. Reflectiveness. Trustworthiness. Okay.
Stephanie, I immediately thought of patience, but I guess I would go with empathy.
I'm hope, kindness.
I'm Erica, ability to listen to others.
You don't necessarily have to do what they say, you just have to be able to listen.
Correct.
Great.
I'm Alan. Forgiveness.
I'm Erica, and well, I think you have to be a good listener. You have to hear what people are saying when they're talking to you. Pay attention.
I'm Joanne, and I would say honesty and integrity.
You cheated.
Mike, and I'll go with integrity.
Quite a good list. So let's keep these up as we start to discuss Kabbalistic ethics, also known as Mussar. So the word in Hebrew for ethics is Mussar. And ethics in Judaism, Mussar, I should say, is not exactly ethics. That's why I put the translation in quotes there. Right, so traditional, like in English, when you talk about ethics, you talk about sort of moral dilemmas and situations where you might have to make a decision one way or another. You know, what would be the ethical thing to do? So they translate this word Mussar as ethics, but really it's more sort of character development. In a wider sense, and developing internal traits like all of these to make you sort of a better person, and that's the basis of what Mussar is. And the word for these personality traits or attributes is midot, and midot. And the singular of this is midah. And sort of the whole purpose of Mussar, which is a very wide tradition in Judaism, is to develop these midot within ourselves, these character traits, these qualities in our psyches. Now, I want to hand out some texts. Did people bring their books? Some of them. Okay. Well, this is the one we're going to be looking at today. Those of you who have it, maybe could share with those of you who don't. Looks like we have some spaced out here, so I think we have enough to share. So I want to begin by sort of asking, can people just throw out some, so there are, how many mitzvot in Judaism?
613.
613. So let's throw out some mitzvot. Can people think of any mitzvot off the top of their head? Tzedakah, right, giving charity. Great. Others?
Visiting the sick.
Visiting the sick, great. Others?
Observing the Sabbath, the mitzvah.
Observing the Sabbath, so resting on Shabbat, great. Others?
Adhering to kashrut?
Adhering to kashrut. Kashrut, whole series of mitzvot about kashrut. Others?
Well, take care of those who have less than you do.
Taking care of those who are less fortunate than you are. Beautiful. Others?
Celebrating with others.
Celebrating with others. Dancing at a wedding.
Dancing at a wedding.
In front of the bride and groom, right, is a mitzvah. Others, other mitzvot. It's funny, I have a funny story. So I was about, I guess it's 15, 16 years ago now. I was working at Calvary Hospital in the Bronx as a Jewish chaplain. It's a hospice, a cancer hospice. And I was also studying at the Jewish Theological Seminary at the time. And I went to my advisor, who was Neil Gilman, who's this very famous professor of Jewish philosophy. You know, they still allowed him to smoke a pipe in his office, even though, like it was like
Right.
illegal everywhere else. You got up on the 6th floor and you'd smell Neil Gilman's pipe smoke. But so I told him what I was doing, working in this cancer hospice. He said, "Why do you want to do that?" I said, "Well, it's a mitzvah." And he said, "Well, it's also a mitzvah to dance at a wedding with a bride and a groom and celebrate." Why do you want to do that? Right? So it is always a choice, right? What mitzvah we follow, what we do, right? Because there's always an opportunity cost, right? If you're doing one mitzvah, you're not doing another mitzvah. But I think every single mitzvah that all of you threw out fall into one category, which is mitzvot of the limbs. The mitzvot that we do with our bodies, right? With our physical bodies, right? Visiting the sick, giving tzedakah, taking care of those who are less fortunate, celebrating with the bride and the groom, having, all of those are things that you do in the world with your physical body. And the majority of mitzvot, of the 613, are mitzvot like that. And I'm happy that none of you came up with the other kind of mitzvot, because it's perfect for my point that I'm trying to make here. But I had the odds were in my favor. The odds were in my favor. So the vast majority of mitzvot are those kinds of mitzvot, which are mitzvot, things that you do, right, for other people, for God, like keeping the Sabbath, right? But they're things that you do with your body. There's another category of mitzvot, which is mitzvot that happen in between your two temples, right? Mitzvot that happen in your mind, in your psyche, in your heart. And these are what came to be called chovot halevavot, the duties of the heart, the obligations, the mitzvot that are based on the heart. Now, Judaism, I'm going to completely simplify here. Judaism is much more comfortable focusing on the duties of the limbs than the duties of the heart. And I'm overgeneralizing. I get that. But in general, that is something that you can probably say about Judaism, right? That when God comes to the Jewish people, God says, will you take the Torah? Will you accept the Torah? Right? The people say, a very famous phrase, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. Right? And it's not lost on the rabbis, it's not lost on our tradition, that they first say we will do before they say we will hear. Right? That the idea is that it's more about action than about belief. Right? It's more about what you do than about what you think. And I love that about Judaism. I think that is one of the most amazing things about being Jewish, right? And I think that allows for so much of Jewish culture, and it allows for so much leeway within Judaism, right? That it's not about dogma. It's not about what you believe. at its core. It's about what you do, right? It's about how you behave in the world towards other people.
It's interesting that you say that, because in Rabbi Seltzer's class, 2 years ago, in the book that we were reading about the development of Judaism, it said that the major difference between Judaism and Christianity, or particularly Catholicism, was one is based on belief, and one is based on what you do. Almost like belief is the whole thing, the whole point of it.
Right. I mean, that's a typical formulation that people say, is that, you know, Christianity and many other traditions are more based on the belief comes first and then the action, right? But Judaism, the action comes first and then you think about it later, right? So it's just do good. Why? Just do good. Then you'll think about why later, right?
That's why they all talk about faith.
Right. And then when people talk about faith, Jews are like, I don't really want to talk about faith. You know, I'll give charity, but I don't really want to talk about, like, you know, why I'm giving charity. I'm giving charity because that's the good thing to do. That's the menschlich thing to do, right? That's what it means to be a Jew, is to act, to do good in the world. So that's a general formulation that people accept.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This part of a ritual, when they're talking about, well, it's discussion of Jacob's ladders and the first rungs, faith, hope, and charity, and they say that of them all, charity is the most important, because faith ends in vision, hope in fruition, but charity goes beyond the grave.
Right, and I think in general, right, it doesn't really matter ultimately why you're doing something, right? It's that you're doing it, right? So it doesn't really matter why you're giving charity. It's that you're giving the charity.
Well, in
you're
the
helping
Jewish
someone.
religion, we give to charity gladly, and we don't look for gratitude. And I always think that's so wonderful. We give to charity because this is what we need to do. You don't expect the person who's receiving it to be grateful. They don't have to, because that's not what we expect.
Right.
Which is really difficult, because most people do expect some kind of reciprocity, some kind of gratitude, which isn't part of our religion. Eddie always says, you give and you do and you expect nothing in return.
Right. Not even a tax write-off. Well, maybe sometimes a tax write-off. Yeah.
That's great.
but no, point taken, right? In Maimonides' formulation about the levels of charity, the highest level of giving charity is anonymous charity, right? Where the donor and the receiver don't know who each other is.
That's a good thing in Judaism. We might be the only ones who really have that concept.
Right. I mean, it's
Well,
very unique.
Whatever, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Right. And so all of this being said, there are mitzvot in the Torah, a few of them, that are about what you think and what you believe. So what I want to do is I want to start with one of them and read this text about one of them. This is from the Torah. I'll read. Does anybody want to try reading the Hebrew, or should I read the Hebrew? I'll read the Hebrew, and then I'll get maybe a volunteer to read the English. Yes, there's one left. Made a perfect number of copies. I knew exactly how many people were going to come. So I'll read. This is from Deuteronomy 6:5-6. It should seem sort of familiar.
We all know this.
All right, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavcha, u'v'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol me'odecha. I get somebody to read the English of that?
Where? Shema
Here,
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Is that the one you're reading?
Yeah, and then ve'ahavta.
And V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, u'v'chol me'odecha.
Yep. Beautiful. Thank you, Eric.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might.
Right, so the rabbis take this and they say, okay, so it's a mitzvah, first of all, to believe in God. And this is also from the Ten Commandments, right? It's the first of the Ten Commandments. Ani Adonai Elohecha, right? I am the Lord your God. And then it's a mitzvah to love God. Right. So first of all, to believe in God.
With every part, every part of you.
Right. But so if we don't even know what God is, right? How are we going to love God, right? And what does it mean to love God? And if God's not a person, right, as the philosophers have come up with, and some sort of maybe amorphous force in the universe, you know, we all came up with our ideas of God, metaphors that work for. How do you feel love towards that? Now we have other mitzvot that involve love. There's ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, which means you should love your neighbor as yourself. That's maybe a little bit easier to chew on, right? Oh, maybe by loving your neighbor as yourself, you're loving God. You can offer that to everybody. And then there's ve'ahavta et hager, that you should love the stranger, or the illegal immigrant, or the alien, right? You should love the stranger. Not only should you love your neighbor, you should love the stranger. You should love the other, right?
Because you were strangers.
Because you were strangers in the land of Egypt, right? And so, because we are all, you know, at some time strangers in our life. But again, it's this idea of love, right? Now you have to, what is love? What does it mean to love somebody? What does it mean to love yourself? Right? These are these sort of ideas that are in Judaism. We don't have a lot of these sort of ideas, right? Because it gets sort of sticky to tell somebody how they're supposed to feel on the inside, right? I always think of like George Orwell in 1984, you know, like the thought police, you know, like, you're not thinking the right thing, you know, you have to think the right thing or you're going to go to jail, right? I can't tell me how to feel, right? So I used to teach in my congregation in Colorado, the teenagers, and we would have this debate, and the debate was, what's more important, action or belief? And in the end, most of the time we came to the conclusion, and we'd have a debate, you know, the kids would debate each other. We come to the conclusion that action is really more important than belief, right? So who cares if I love the stranger as long as I'm taking care of him or her, right? Who cares if I love my neighbor as long as I'm taking care of my neighbor?
Well, maybe that's what it means. There's love.
The love is actually the action.
Yeah.
You could go, right, that's a typical Jewish way to do it, right? The love is demonstrated through action. But what if I really feel like I hate this person? Like, what if I'm thinking in my head, oh, I really hate this person, but I have to help them because that's what I do as a Jew. But I really loathe this individual.
But you see what's happening there, I think, is that by feeling that you loathe that person, yet you feel as though you have to help them, there's a close relationship with the heart. And by feeling that you loathe them, you're closing your heart. So for me, the idea of being able to help is having that open heart. And the two somehow don't seem compatible.
Don't seem compatible.
Act as if.
Act as if. But again, I mean, right, in Judaism, it's what's primary is the action, right? It doesn't
Doing the right thing.
doing the right thing, thinking the right thing, not so much, right? Because it's hard to quantify even, right? Or an easier one is giving charity, I don't want to give charity, but I have to because that's what we do, right? That's sort of, it's a mitzvah to give charity, so I do it. I might not want to give charity, right? I might be kicking and screaming against it, but it doesn't matter what I want to do. It doesn't matter what I believe, right? It matters what I do with my physical limbs. But again, within Judaism, there is this sort of undercurrent of it's important to cultivate love. It's important to cultivate sort of qualities within your psyche about how to act in the world. So I want to skip forward in time to Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the ancestors, which is probably written. What's that?
That's just.
You're laughing at my translation.
Yeah. Ancestors.
Ancestors,
Fathers.
fathers.
That's right, Home. You have to be trying not to be
Being very-
politically incorrect.
Right, I'm being egalitarian, exactly. I was trained at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, so I understand what it means to be egalitarian. Right, so
What's the other translation for those of us?
Father.
fathers.
Yeah.
And Pirkei actually doesn't mean ethics. It means passages. It means paragraphs. So the literal translation would be the paragraphs of the fathers. But I think a better,
Yes.
more modern translation would be the ethics of the ancestors, right? Or the teachings of the ancestors. That being said, there is not one woman in the whole lot of the teachings, right? They mention lots of male rabbis.
We really don't care. Now it's better.
Now it's getting better. It's getting better. It's getting better. The women's Torah is still coming into the world. In a lot of ways that it was not. I mean, we could have a whole class on that. That's one thing, by the way. I'm going to propose some classes for next year because I'm going to be teaching next fall, and I'd love people's input. Maybe we want to talk about women's Torah or something like that as a class to teach next year. So anyway, Ethics of the Ancestors. This is sort of the central book of ethics from the rabbis. Most of the Talmud and the Mishnah is about very specifics about law, like tort law, or if you find an object, what are your obligations to return that object or not return, or kashrut, or a lot of the mitzvot, charity, right? The specifics of how you're supposed to do the halacha, the 613 Jewish laws. This is from the Mishnah also, which is part of the Talmud, the writings of the rabbis. But this entire book is not about the specifics about what you're supposed to do. It's more what you're supposed to think or feel or believe, and qualities within yourself that you're supposed to develop. That being said, it is sort of the fundamental writing of the Talmud and of the rabbis, because it sets out their entire worldview. Beginning with, it starts by saying Moses got the Torah from God on Mount Sinai, and he gave it to Joshua, and Joshua gave it to the elders, and the elders gave it to the men of the Great Assembly, and then it follows this lineage all the way down to the rabbis. And so it kind of puts them in the lineage, and then it goes through all these different rabbis and talking about what their main teachings were, and what they thought sort of would make a good person and a good life in this world. Sort of like our list that we came up with, right? But this is the rabbis, so they're a little bit more important than us, or something, I don't know. So this is from Pirkei Avot. I just chose a couple of representative passages from Pirkei Avot. Again, this is not a Kabbalistic text, but this is what you would call an early Mussar text, an early ethics text. I'm going to skip the Hebrew, and let's just do the English. Do I have somebody to attempt it? I'm sort of losing my voice too. So,
But this one,
where it says Antigonus, man of Sochol.
who is it? Where's Soho? So
It's somewhere in Israel.
Is it
Yeah.
on page
South of
two?
Kausas.
It's on page 1 also. So it says rabbinic, and then Pirkei Avot, and then there's some Hebrew, and then it says Antigonus.
I'll read it.
I just listen because I have trouble with
Antigonus, man of Soko, received from Shimon the righteous. He would say, "Do not be as servants who are serving the master in order to receive a reward. Rather be as servants who are serving the master, not in order to receive a reward. And may the fear of heaven be upon you."
Right, so this is sort of what you said before, which is you don't give charity because you expect to get something back, right? You don't do good things because you expect to get good back. You do good things because it's important to do good, right?
And then may the fear of heaven be upon you. Where does that work?
What does that fit into the whole thing?
I was just gonna say, are we looking as if we do it out of fear as opposed to doing it out of desire?
I don't think so. I
mean,
don't
is-
think that's
What-
I don't
Go
really
ahead.
think that's what it meant.
What do you think it means?
Because it's an afterthought. He puts that in because you do need to put in heaven or God somewhere.
Oh, we'll just throw God in.
Because it really is an afterthought. It's not part of the.
But why wouldn't you put something like, "And may the love of heaven be upon you," or "May the blessings of heaven be
Yeah,
upon
well, I
you"?
mean,
Why
this
is
is,
it
don't
like
you
a
say
negative
that's sort of
connotation?
automatically, and maybe this is one of those things.
Well, what's interesting is the word for fear here is morah, which is from Hebrew root Yud Resh Aleph, which means fear. But a better translation would be awe.
Ah.
Right? So there's this word yirah or morah, which means sort of awe. The best description of awe that I have is when I was in Breckenridge, Colorado, and it was the summertime, and my parents were coming to visit, and we all went up the mountain on a chairlift. Actually, I think it was a family reunion. We all went up on the mountain on a chairlift, and this was sort of the activity for the day. And I was with my daughter, and I'm going up, and I'm looking down, and we just get higher and higher and higher, and I'm like way above the trees, these very tall trees, and I'm looking down, and it's like the earth is like splayed out underneath me, and I'm just like, there's this tiny little bar separating me from like just falling into the world, and I discovered in that moment that I have a fear of heights. Right? But
I'm afraid just hearing about it.
right, and so I started to hold on really tight, and my feet started to sort of tingle, because and I'm looking down and I'm feeling a little dizzy, and that feeling, and like that, almost like you're gonna fall into the world, right? That it's just so massive, and that you're sort of nothing, that to me is yirah. That to me is a fear of heaven. And other people describe it, like looking up at the stars and seeing how vast the cosmos is, and how tiny we are, and how sort of insignificant we are in the grand scheme of the universe. That's sort of a fear, sort of an awe in this sense as well, right? It's fear, but it's not really fear in the traditional sense of like, oh, I'm afraid God's gonna punish me. It's more like, wow, like I'm
Insignificant on my own.
right in the vast cosmos, right? And it's I think it's also interesting that it doesn't say the fear of God.
No.
It says the fear of heaven, right? And so I think it's and how about we say this? May the awe of the cosmos be upon you. Maybe that might be a better translation. May the awe of the cosmos, of the gravity and the enormity of the cosmos be upon you, right?
That makes more sense.
Yeah.
So perhaps that, does that resolve it for you?
Yeah.
Maybe a little
Yeah.
bit, right? So often, when you find a problem in the Jewish text, it's good to get to the Hebrew and to really kind of dig in and see what
makes
it's
a difference.
actually, what the actual roots are, right? Because I don't think the rabbis would say that action should be motivated out of fear. Although there is a very famous phrase, which is Reshit Chochma Yirat Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the fear, or the awe, it's Yirah again, of God, right? But again, it's awe, not fear, right? The beginning of sort of all action is sort of, I guess, to realize maybe how insignificant you are, maybe in a certain Buddhist sense, right? To take your ego down a notch and say, you're not any great. You're totally insignificant. Have people heard this really famous Hasidic quote that you're supposed to keep a piece of paper in each pocket, right? You keep a piece of paper in one pocket that says, "It was for me that the world was created," and you keep a piece of paper in another pocket that says, "I am but dust and ashes." And then when you're feeling too high on yourself, you take out the piece of paper that says, "I am but dust and ashes," to remind yourself that you're nothing. Right? And then when you're feeling really bad about yourself and low self-esteem, you take out the piece of paper that says, "It was for me that the world was created." Right? So this is sort of maybe the "I am but dust and ashes," right? And that's the way to begin to do to be ethical in this world, is to realize, the world doesn't revolve around me. I'm not God. Although, right, from a Kabbalistic sense, we are all God, right? And God's inside of all us. Right? I'm not only me is God, right?
It's interesting in our language that when we want to ask if someone is religious, the term we use, "Are you God-fearing?"
Oh, yeah.
Right. And again, that's a translation from the Hebrew. Right, and that's probably a translation from Yirat Shamayim, which means the fear of heaven, right? The awe of the cosmos, right? And so when you think about that God-fearing, next time you hear that, you might want to think, well, that person doesn't really mean God-fearing. They mean, do you realize that the world doesn't revolve around you? And I think that's sort of the beginning of all ethical action in the world, right? That, if you do something good for somebody, it's taking away from yourself, right? When I go home tonight, I'm going to want to, go watch TV, but instead I'm going to have to do the dishes, right, for my kids, right? Because I realize that the world doesn't revolve around me, right? That maybe later I'll watch TV, right? But first, you have to realize that it's not all about you.
Well, I think you have to have humility, and that's really what this is.
Yeah, that's the basis of it, I would say, for sure.
We should say faring instead of fearing. So like a seafarer is someone goes in the way of the sea. And God-fearing would
travel
be
with God.
the way of God. Yeah.
Beautiful. So that brings us to the next quote that I picked out, which is also from Pirkei Avot, and this is from Rabbi Hillel. Would anybody like to read this? It's a very famous quote.
I'll read it.
Sure.
He, Rabbi Hillel, used to say, "If I am not for me, who will be for me? And when I am for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, then when?"
And this is very kind of bringing out that similar
In
tension.
Israel, they took that as a motto.
Sure, and there are songs, Imena Nili Nili, right? And it rhymes, which is a good thing too. It rhymes. But it's a very famous quote, right? But again, it's sort of bringing out this same tension again, right? That the individual and their own needs and their own wants versus your obligation to the other. And if not now, when? I think it's sort of an add-on. Maybe people could think about also why that's part of this formulation. Anybody have any ideas?
If what you're going to do is be the best person you can be, now is the time to do it.
Right. Right. Whether it's being good to yourself or being good to somebody else. Right. So these are sort of examples of Pirkei Avot and the kinds of things that it teaches. Here's a third example. This is the last one from Pirkei Avot, and this is another very famous quote. Would somebody like to read it for me?
Benzoma says, "Who is the wise one?
Page 2.
He who learns from all people, as it says, I have acquired understanding from all my teachers." Psalm 199. Who is the mighty one? He who conquers his impulse, as it says, slowness to anger is better than a mighty person and the ruler than the mighty person and the ruler of his spirit. The mighty person is ruler of his spirit than the conqueror of the city. Proverbs. Who is the rich one? He who is happy with his lot, as it says, when you eat from the work of your hands, you will be happy, and it will be well with you. Psalm 128:2. You will be happy in this world, and it will be well with you in the world to come. Who is honored? He who honors the created beings, as it says, for those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me will be held in little esteem. 1 Samuel.
All right, so this sort of flips traditional ideas on their head, right? Let's pick it apart. All right, mi chacham, who's wise? The person who learns from everybody, right? And so this is a quality it's telling you to have, right? An important quality is being open to learning from everybody. Again, back to the humility, right? So to be wise doesn't mean to be book smart. It means to be able to learn from everybody. All right. Who is mighty? Who is gibor? The word is gibor. It can mean a hero or somebody who's strong. Right? Strong and mighty. Who's strong and mighty? Well, the person who's strong and mighty in conquering their impulses, you know, and their bad habits that they have, you know. Right. What does it mean to be mighty? It doesn't mean to be, you know, a weightlifter. It doesn't mean to slay dragons. It means to slay your internal dragons and your internal demons. Right. And by the way, this gibor, right? So so far, these two qualities that we've discussed are two of the sfirot. Chacham is from chokhmah, which means wisdom, right? And gibur is from gevura, which is strength or judgment, right? Which, if people want to look back on these spherotic charts,
Okay.
it is right before Roman numeral 1. Right, so you see here up on the upper right, chokhmah, right? And again, if you want to associate it with the body, right? Chokhmah is wisdom. It's the right brain. Right brain, yes, the right brain. And Binah is the left brain, right? But chokhmah is one of those qualities, right? Gevura down there is din or judgment, rigor. Right, but also strength. And what does it mean to be strong? Well, it means to actually be able to conquer your inner impulses. Right. So again, eventually Kabbalists will pick up on these and they'll sort of expand on the sfirot as inner qualities that we have to have. But I want to continue to just kind of move through this, right? So who is Gibor, who is a strong person, somebody who conquers their impulses. Who's a rich person? The person who's happy with what they have. Right? And again, it's flipping it on its head. Right? And it's not a direct comparison, but you might compare Ashir, being rich, to sort of chesed, this idea of love in the sfirot here, which is sort of an outgoing impulse. So Miashir, and then who is honored, the one who honors other people or other beings. Right. So once again, flipping sort of the idea on its head. Anybody have any comments about this?
What is this world to come?
See, you asked me the unexpected question. You know, of course you're going to ask me that. All right. In Hebrew, the word is olam haba, which can mean the world that will come, meaning like the afterlife, or the messianic age. But there's some rabbinic commentaries that say actually it's olam haba, and the word ba can mean coming in the present tense. And so there's some rabbinic commentaries that say olam haba actually means the world that is coming, and that is
your future.
Well, that is actually here, that at all times, if we're able to access it, right? The world that is coming, continually coming into existence in this world, but it requires a change of perspective. And if you look in Daniel Matt, his translation of the Zohar, he translates olam haba, that phrase, as the world that is coming. And whenever you look in one of his footnotes why he does that, he says, this rabbinic commentary that says it's actually the world that is continually coming into existence. And there is a huge mystical and even non-mystical idea that the world to come, that the messianic age is actually here and now, and the afterlife, heaven, is here and now. If only we change our perception to perceive it as such. Should I tell a story?
Sure.
I love stories. Our rabbi got us used to that.
So there's a great, so you might have heard this one, but this is a great story that there's a Hasidic rabbi who, his whole life he wanted to know what heaven looked like, and what hell looked like, because he'd heard all these concepts about heaven and hell. And one day an angel comes to him and says, okay, you've prayed so hard, you've been asking, what does heaven look like? What does hell look like? I'm going to show you heaven and hell. And so he takes him and he says, what do you want to see first? And the man says, I'll see hell first. Gehenna. I'll see Gehenna first. Get the bad out of the way. And so he takes him into this room. And in this room, there are all of these people who look emaciated, with these emaciated, hungry faces, like they're very hungry, and they're all screaming and crying, and they have these metal rods preventing their arms from bending, and they have these spoons in their hands, and there's this big, wide, round table, and in the middle of the big, wide, round table is a pot of the most delicious stew you could possibly eat, and in that, and they all want the stew, and they keep trying to get it with the spoons, but they can't bend their arms to feed themselves, and so they're all just starving because they can't feed themselves, and he says, okay, I get it looks horrible, so can you please show me heaven? And the angel says, okay, and he takes him to this other room, and it looks exactly the same, with the pot of food in the middle. I'm sure you've all heard this one before, right? Pot of food in the middle of the table, and the arms with the rods, but they're all happy and joyous and celebrating and eating, and what's the difference? Well, the difference is they're feeding each other, right? So what's the difference between heaven and hell? Well, it's really a matter of perspective, right? It's really a matter of how you approach the world. And I would say it's the same thing sort of in our daily lives, right? We can live in heaven now, or we can live in hell now, depending on how we face the world, right? And how we interact with other people. It can be a heaven on earth, or it can be a hell on earth. Alma, that's the world to come.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I want to fast forward a little bit more, right? So we have the writings of the rabbis, and then we have the Middle Ages come, and in the 11th century there was a rabbi named Bachya ibn Pakuda, 1040, and he wrote a book called Chovot HaLevavot, which means the duties of the heart. And let's let him speak for himself and read his writings. Do I have a volunteer to read where it says chapter 5? Great.
The ethics of the body and the ethics of the soul. The wisdom of the Torah is divided into two parts. One, the wisdom of the visible that enables us to understand the duties of the body and its members. And these include not only all the practical obligations, both of ethics and religion, but also the physical obligations and restraints of a good and moral life. Two, the duties of the heart and mind, duties that concern thought and feeling and whose fulfillment is entirely in the hidden depths of the human heart and soul. And this is the wisdom of the invisible. The duties of the heart and mind have all of them their roots in human reason, and like some corporeal duties would be recognized as binding even without revelation.
Right, so this is basically the formulation that I've been putting forward all evening. Right, that there are the duties of the limbs, the things that you do, mitzvot that you do with your body, and then there's the duties of the heart, the mitzvot that you sort of do internally, in your mind, in your heart. And in his time, for Judaism, this was a pretty this was sort of, a revelatory thing. This was different, because all of Jewish practice was focused on what do you do with your, what really focused on the duties of the limbs rather than the duties of the heart. And so Bachya ibn Pakuda, who was probably influenced by the other cultures around him, said, well, yes, Judaism has this category of the duties of the limbs, but it also has this category of the duties of the heart, which are also important as well. So he wrote this book about the duties of the heart. So let's get a volunteer to read chapter 6. So what some of the things that he considers the duties of the heart.
Examples of duties of the heart. Among commands relating to duties of the heart and mind are the following: to believe that the world has a creator who created it from nothing and that there is none other like him, to accept his unity and worship him in our hearts, to devote intelligent thought to the wonders of his creation, so that they may be to us a sign concerning him, to trust in him and humble ourselves before him, to fear him, to tremble at the thought that he looks at us, at all that is revealed and all that is hidden about us, to desire to do his will, and to concentrate all our efforts upon good deeds that are absolutely disinterested and only motivated by love of God. Further, that we should love him and those that love him, and hate those that hate him.
Maybe a little troubling there, right?
Not troubling. That's how wars start.
Yeah.
That's right. So we might not agree with him about what the duties are. Yeah, go ahead.
How does that relate to Kabbalism?
Well, this book is sort of the first formulation that later Kabbalistic Mussar practitioners will point to as there are these internal states that we have to cultivate, these midot, these qualities, right? And so I don't want to look necessarily too much at the specifics of the qualities here, because let's remember this was the 11th century, right? It was a completely different milieu and culture, even than the rabbis, right? Which, if you look at Pirkei Avot, it's sort of much more tame, and you could see that he's sort of being influenced by medieval thought, and even later early modern stuff. It's much less controversial. But the idea that's important here that I wanted to bring out is just the fact that there are states, internal states, that are important to cultivate, like love, like patience, reflectiveness, kindness, compassion, integrity, all of those things, forgiveness, right? That this idea, and so this was really the first Jewish text that sort of just put that out there to say, yeah, it's important what you do with your body and with your limbs, but what's also important is what you do inside your mind, right, and in your heart.
And first and foremost is loving God.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. Right. And loving God's creations.
Right, loving God's creations, which might be part of loving God, right?
Right, yeah.
And again, right, from a traditional Jewish perspective, I don't necessarily care whether I love the person that I'm giving charity to. I'm just going to give charity to them because that's what I do.
But
yeah.
This seems to me that this ties in with the awe of the cosmos thing, because if, in fact, you're thinking about this world as a creation of God, and how awesome that is, that this creation exists, so that when you look out at all the things that are created, you're filled with awe and love. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, right? So I think it's sort of complementary.
From this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of complementary, right? That your internal states can affect your external, actions, and that it's important to cultivate these qualities. So that's the only thing I wanted to bring out with this particular text. Right, that you can't hide. Right. Better watch out. God as Santa Claus, right?
Oh. Yeah.
Right, the eyes of the omnipresent are on us all the time. Right, I used to study educational theory and children's developmental theory, and there's a very famous psychologist named Lawrence Kohlberg. And he had a whole theory about the moral development of people, and he talked about, and he was sort of disproven because he made all his studies on boys rather than girls. And there was a woman named Carol Gilligan who came along and who looked at it a different way. But basically he said that there were 6 stages of moral development, and that we move that we sort of develop along these stages, but we sometimes go back to one or another stage. But the first beginning stage of moral reasoning is doing things out of the fear of authority. Right? And that I'm not going to steal that thing because I'm afraid I'm going to be arrested, or I'm afraid I'm going to be made, get in trouble. But I think that's a very simple thing, right? And now the largest stage, the highest stage, is stage 6, which is sort of being aware of the global implications of my actions, and how, the butterfly effect sort of thing, right? And this is like people like, Gandhi and Martin Luther King, these are put forward as people who are like that. Although, Dalai Lama, right? Although we always when we put people on a pedestal like that, they always sort of fall, right? They all have faults. Everybody has faults, right? So I want to fast forward now another 300 years to the 13th century, and I want to look in this book now to a Kabbalist named Isaac of Akko, page 118. This is from Isaac of Akko.
And asked to be accepted as one of them. The master of meditation replied, "My son, may you be blessed from heaven, for your intention is good. But let me know that you attained equanimity or not." He responded, "Master, clarify your words." He explained, "My son, if one person honors you and another humiliates you, are the two equal in your eyes or not?" He answered, "By the life of your soul, my master, I do feel pleasure and satisfaction from the one who honors me, and pain from the one who humiliates me. But I am not vengeful, nor do I bear a grudge." The master said, "My son, go away in peace. For as long as you have not attained equanimity and still feel humiliation from something done to you, you are not ready for your thought to be linked on high. You are not ready to come and seclude yourself in meditation. But go and humble your heart further, genuinely, until you attain equanimity. Then you can experience aloneness."
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's sort of Zen, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Very much, right? So first of all, let's back up for a second and talk about Isaac of Akko. They say that his thought was influenced by Sufi thought, right? And Sufism is sort of the mystical, is the Kabbalah of Islam. Right? It's the mystical part of Islam. And there's this idea of hitbodedut. Everybody remember all these attributes? I'm going to erase them.
We've all internalized it.
That's
Right.
it.
We
We're
all
all,
have them now.
Right.
we're all ready to go master the aloneness, right?
Because we've reached equanimity.
Yeah.
Right, it's very Zen, right? It really is. Anyway, so hitbodedut. It's from the root badad, which means to be alone. And it's a reflexive verb, meaning being alone with yourself. It's like super aloneness, right? And this word is often used to describe Jewish meditation. And there's a version of Jewish meditation from Rabbi Newman of Bratslav, who was a Hasidic master. And he called this hitbodedut, but what he did was he would go off alone in the woods by himself, and he would just speak to God in Yiddish, which was his native language. And there's an actual practice that he recommended to his students, to go off and be in nature by yourself and just talk to God in your own native language. And there are wacky renewal Jews who practice this today still. But in its
Equanimity.
you got to get to equanimity first, right? But in its first formulation, hitbodedut was from these early Kabbalists, and what it meant was sort of a traditional sort of meditation, right? Being sort of secluded from other people and sitting in meditation, being by yourself. And so this individual, Rabbi Avner, whoever that happens to be, really wanted to go off and be in meditation by himself among this group of people, these mystics who would go off into the mountains and the caves and meditate all day and sit alone. Now, again, not very Jewish, right? There's a reason there's no such thing as Jewish monks, right? It's not really usual for Jews to go off and be alone and meditate, right? Although I'm an introvert, there are a lot of great Jewish introverts, right? But the ideal in Judaism and Jewish spirituality is to be together in community, right? And again, it's the same sort of juxtaposition between faith and action, right? That what's important is acting and doing for other people, right? Not, and to be spiritual is not, to sit alone in the mountains and say Om, But what's spiritual in Judaism is to give charity and to honor your parents and to treat people fairly, right? That is sort of the height of spirituality in Judaism. That being said, again, it's a very old, we're an old people. We've been around for a long time. There are Jewish mystics who have been hermits, who have been like monks, not exactly monks, but they are these, what were called mitbodedim, right? The people who would go off and seclude themselves in the mountains. And this man, Rabbi Avner, really wanted to do that, right? He really wanted to go off and meditate in the mountains and be a mystic and, just sit all day and just be alone and meditate. And so he goes to this group, right, in the mountains, and he talks to this man, the master of meditation. And he asks him, have you achieved equanimity? And the word for equanimity is hishtavut in Hebrew. I guess I can write that down too. Which means, it's from shaveh, which means to be equal. And again, it's like a reflexive verb, to be equal within yourself. And I had a great teacher, Rabbi Miles Crossan, who said he didn't want to translate it equanimity, but rather equipoise, which means basically from this quote, no matter what happens to you, you approach everything the same, with the same sort of equipoise.
Isn't that like the Stoics, in a way?
In a way, right? Right. It's mindfulness, and it's being aware of your own internal states. Right. So, so he says to him, right? What do you mean by equanimity? What do you mean by that? And the master says, if somebody honors you, if somebody humiliates you, is it the same, or is there something different? Do you feel differently between somebody honoring you and somebody humiliating you? And he said, well, yeah, I feel good when somebody honors me, and I feel kind of crummy when somebody is not nice to me, right? When they humiliate me. He said, but I'm not mean to them. I don't harbor a grudge. I don't, But yeah, how can I avoid feeling happy when somebody does something nice to me and feeling sort of crummy when somebody does something bad to me? And the master says, sorry, you can't sit in seclusion by yourself. You're not ready. Because first you have to attain this quality, this inner state of equanimity, of hishtavut.
And by attaining that state, what you're really doing is letting go of ego.
Exactly. Right. Which is why this is so sort of sounds like a Zen Buddhist story, right? Because that's what this is all about, right? It's about getting to the point where you're not caught up in your own ego, right? Where you're not being carried away by your feelings about somebody humiliating you and fixating on that, I feel bad, or I feel so great, somebody said something nice about me. No, being in this sort of state of equanimity means it's all you still are experiencing the same state of compassion towards the world, no matter what, no matter what somebody says to you. There's a great story from the Dalai Lama. He said that there was a man who was a friend of his, who was a prisoner of the Chinese, he said, for 15 years or something. And the man came, to him, and the Dalai Lama said, how was it for you in captivity for 15 years after he got out? And he said, how was it for you? And the man said, well, I was afraid and I was in danger all the time. And he said, well, what did they do? Did they torture you? Or he said, well, yeah, but that's not what I was afraid of. That's not what I was in danger of. He said, well, what were you in danger of? He said, I was in danger of losing compassion for my captors. Right? And so that's sort of, I think, the same level that we're talking about here. Right?
You're not expecting any of us to feel this way.
I haven't achieved this myself, so I wouldn't prescribe it for any of you. But I would say it's an ideal that we can sort of think about and move towards in our lives, right? And it's something that we can keep in mind when we're feeling caught up in the mishigas of our lives, or when somebody's being really cruel to you, or somebody's humiliating you, or to remember, I have to have compassion for this person. There's a great quote from the Baal Shem Tov, founder of Hasidism. He said, "We spend so much time making excuses for ourselves about why we did something bad or wrong, and we never do that for other people." He said it's actually the opposite we should be doing. We shouldn't be making excuses for ourselves, and we should be making excuses for other people. Right? We should be spending our time making excuses for why somebody did something wrong. Right? To always sort of judge people. Dan chavercha. This is another thing from Pirkei Avot. Dan et chavercha b'kaf zachut. To always judge your neighbor favorably. Right? To always give people the benefit of the doubt. And when your ego's getting in the way, and when you're all caught up in your emotions and in your feelings about how somebody's treated you, it's really hard to have compassion for them. It's really hard to judge them favorably. It's really hard to make excuses for them. And that being said, right, there is real evil in the world, right? There is, there is real evil in the world, and there is, there are people and situations which maybe you can't make excuses for. And shouldn't. Absolutely. That, on the other hand,
That's why
on the other hand,
because that's what Jews do.
right. On the other hand, how many hands do you have? Right. You guys know the story about the rabbi. These two people came to him and had this huge disagreement. These neighbors, and the rabbi listens to them, and he says, listens to the first one. He says, "You're right," and then he listens to the second one. He says, "And you're right," and then his wife comes. He says, "How can they both be right? They can't both be right." And he goes, "You're right." Right. So yes, there is a point at which you have to not be forgiving of real evil in this world, for sure. But I don't think on our daily lives, we don't really generally encounter that. What we encounter is people who've had a crummy day, who cut us off in traffic. What we encounter is people who might be angry because of whatever reason. Maybe they lost their job, and they yell at you, or whatever. And in those situations, yes, you need to approach them all with compassion. And that's sort of what this is saying. You can't go and seclude yourself from the rest of the world to connect to the cosmos and the heavens if you haven't yet achieved this level of egolessness, compassion for everyone, and all of the qualities we talked about, humility, forgiveness, all of that comes into play here. And that's the challenge of the spiritual path of being in this world with other people, right? That's why we're put here, to be with each other, to learn these lessons. And so, no, I don't expect us to be there. But I expect us to have that as something that we try and work towards. Yeah, for sure. And so that's another sort of example of Kabbalistic ethics. Now I'm going to do 5 more minutes of study, and then I'm going to take the last 5 minutes to just discuss some of the possibilities for classes for next year, because I have to get that in to the powers that be as soon as possible. So I want to move backwards now, not in time, but in this book, to page 83. So this is a book called Tomer Devorah, a section of a book called Tomer Devorah, which means the palm tree of Devorah. And it's by Moshe Cordovero, who lived in the 16th century in Sfat, among a whole bunch of people who fled the Inquisition in Spain, and where the resurgence of Kabbalah came about. in the 16th century. He was a contemporary of Isaac Luria, who I've mentioned before, a very famous Kabbalist. And he wrote a lot of Kabbalistic works, but this is one of his most famous works, and it's all about the ethics of Kabbalah. And what he does is he looks at the system of the Sfirot as a series of midot. I don't have it on the board anymore. A series of personality traits, of attributes that we need to cultivate. And his idea is that by cultivating these...
Would you like a little fucking thing for your throat?
Sure.
See, you're struggling there.
I
575.
I didn't quite lose my voice yet, but it's on its way out. So he had a series. He looks at the Sfirot as a series of qualities, internal qualities that we need to cultivate, like the ones that we put up on the board when we started. So let's just read a little bit of his words. Why don't I read so that I can skip around? And now that I have this sucking candy, throat lozenge, I guess much better. So, imitate your creator. This is a concept called imitatio Dei, which means imitating God. In modern philosophy, you might say, well, maybe God is just a creation of an ideal human, right? I have this mentor, Rabbi Emmanuel Goldsmith, who was a student of Mordecai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionism. And whenever he would do a prayer service, he would say, why do we say all these things about God? That God lifts up the bent down, and that God clothes the naked and feeds the hungry. Do we think that God is this, being on high? No. That we say that because this is what we're supposed to do. Whenever you see it say God feeds the hungry, that means this is important. Feed the hungry, right? And so, in a sense, right, saying imitating the Creator, maybe the Creator is, in a sense, an ideal human being, right? What we think an ideal human being is supposed to be. So, imitate your Creator. Then you will enter the mystery of the supernal form, the divine image in which you were created. If you resemble the divine in body but not in action, you distort the form. People will say of you, a lovely form whose deeds are ugly. For the essence of the divine image is action. What good is it if your anatomy corresponds to the supernal form while your actions do not resemble God's? So imitate the acts of Keter, at the highest of the Sfirot. If you want to go look back at the Sfirot chart here. Keter, the highest of the Sfirot. The 13 qualities of compassion. And then I'm going to skip ahead. You should desire the well-being of your fellow creature, eyeing his good fortune benevolently. Let his honor be as precious to you as your own, for you and your fellow are one and the same. And so this is the first quality that he talks about. He divides it up into 13 qualities, but basically the first quality is desiring the well-being of others, right, in the way that you would desire it for yourself. And then we can fast forward here to the next page, page 84. The quality of humility. Who said humility? Did somebody say humility? Did you say humility? Somebody said humility. Erica, see, you're absolutely right. The quality of humility includes all qualities, since it pertains to Keter, right? It's the highest, and what's within Keter is humility, right? Which is also egolessness, right? Although Keter transcends all the other qualities, it does not exalt itself. On the contrary, it descends, constantly gazing below. Its emanator constantly gazes into it, bestowing goodness, while it gazes at those beneath. God nourishes everything, from the horned buffalo to nits, disdaining no creature. For if he disdained creatures due to their insignificance, they could not endure for even a moment. Rather, he gazes and emanates compassion upon them all. So should you be good to all creatures, disdaining none. Even the most insignificant creature should assume importance in your eyes. Attend to it. Do good to whomever needs your goodness. So that is sort of the two of the qualities that exist within Keter, right? The highest sphera. And the central one really is humility, right? Egolessness. Right? Realizing that you're just a speck of dust, right? Back to Yirah, back to Morah Shamayim, right? The fear of heaven, the awe of the cosmos. Right? I'm no big shakes, right? I'm nothing really. Right? I'm just another piece of this cosmos.
But that's only in one pocket.
Right, that's only one part. That's true. That's true. Right. Right.
But
Well,
it's
back
always there.
Right, back to Hillel, right? If I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? Right? Right, so that's what's in Keter. Now we can fast forward here, page 86. How should you train yourself in the quality of chokhmah, wisdom? Supernal wisdom, though concealed and transcendent, spreads over everything that exists. Concerning this, it is said, how manifold are your works, O God, in wisdom you have made them all. So should your wisdom be accessible to all. Right? Back to Pirkei Avot again. Mi chacham hamlomed mikol adam, who is wise, the one who learns from all people. Teach people what will be useful to them, according to each one's capacity, pouring out to each as much wisdom as you can. Don't let anything deter you. So, let's skip ahead now. How should you train yourself in the quality of bina, understanding? By returning to God, right? This is involved with forgiveness, seeking forgiveness, tshuva, right? Nothing is more important, for this corrects every flaw. Right? So what is it when you feel contrite? Is that the word? Right? Being contrite, right? This feeling of feeling responsible when you've done something wrong. That's a quality that exists within Bina that you're supposed to cultivate. And then we'll just look at this last one here, page 88. I sent you all a link to the rest of this book. There's an online version of it. If you're interested, you should read it. The translation's a little hard to access. But if you're interested in learning more about sort of the way Kabbalists thought about these qualities, you can order this book. There's a great translation called The Palm Tree of Devorah. So how should you train yourself in the quality of chesed, love? The basic way you enter the mystery of chesed is by loving God, now coming back full circle, to the extreme. Not abandoning devotion for any reason at all, since nothing attracts you in the least compared to loving God. So first attend to the demands of your devotion. The remainder of your time is for whatever else you need. Who is a chassid? One who acts in love towards God. In expressing love to creatures here below, intend that you are mending up above after the same pattern. You thereby bestow love on God.
As below,
so above. Right.
In other words, you bestow love on God. Never mind, God doesn't bestow love on you.
You bestow love on God through being kind to other creatures. Right? Formulated as giving in order to receive, or receiving in order to give, or giving in order to receive. Right? That we give to other people in order to receive that God will receive. Right? So thank you all. I'm going to stop the video now.